let me first start by saying this isn't an official therapy session. It would be somewhat unethical to stream a therapy session like such. But we'll take it as a conversation. I am a licensed therapist and we're just chatting and brainstorming. Do you feel comfortable with that?
I do. I do. And it's funny, even if I was in a therapy session without the stream, I think I would act exactly the same way.
That's interesting. That's one of the things I was thinking about. I do want you to tell me what you want to talk about today, but I was thinking about how you separate your streaming from who you are, if there is a separation at all.
Not much.
Okay.
Not much. Because when you're live this much, it's like, it's hard to
You're
really...
an open book?
Yeah, it's hard to hide it all. So even if I was in a therapy session without the camera, I would be thinking about what the chat would be saying and how they'd be reacting to everything.
They're in your head.
Yeah,
Okay.
like we're one and the same, connected
Okay.
to each other.
Very interesting. So we'll get more into that, but I wanted to sort of start with asking you what you were hoping to talk about, what your objective was for our chat today.
Probably a bit of everything, like about how to like dial back the rhetoric that got me banned.
Okay.
A little bit about mental health because that's a major disagreement. Like I wouldn't actually, I don't really believe in therapy
Okay.
for the most part, even though my mom's a therapist.
No way.
Yeah, she is.
Your mom's a therapist?
She is, yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so she does. She's a therapist, and we disagree all the time. I don't really believe in mental health. Like they said, I had ADHD when I was a kid.
Okay.
I don't think it's real.
Okay.
I don't think it's a real disorder. I don't think depression is something. I think that's overprescribed to people. I think autism, all these like mental anxiety, for example, it's like a common theme for people where I'm from.
Okay. Where
But
are you from? Sorry. If
I was born in New York, but I grew up a lot in Connecticut. So
Okay.
like Northeast, you know,
Okay.
high IQ, waspy area, you know, like really internal
Okay.
people.
So you're talking about the part of mental health that focuses a lot on diagnosing people, right? And this idea that some people can be misdiagnosed, or how often do you jump to diagnosing someone? And so I too have my own opinions about that. I focus less on diagnosing and I do a little bit more of like talk therapy, no matter the diagnosis, if you will. Not that it's not useful
Okay.
for the other therapists to
So
do
talk
what they
therapy,
do.
like what Tony Soprano and Dr. Melfi did.
Not exactly, but yes. I mean, I like to. So basically, I try and work with you to get closer to the fulfillment you're looking for. So if you're noticing a pattern or you're noticing a problem, something that's getting in the way of you feeling a certain way, I try to make sense of the context. Why is this happening? Where does it come from? How does it help you? How does it not help you? And then kind of with this insight, what efforts to adjust could you put into place so that you get closer to where you want to go, in a nutshell.
Okay. So
And you can be talking to me about that whether you have ADHD or not, for example.
okay. So you think I should give you a specific problem that needs addressing?
Well, not necessarily. I think you did already tell me that you want to talk about changing the rhetoric that got you banned, right? Or
I don't even know if I want to, because I kind of
Okay.
I think that's what makes me me, you know.
Okay.
And so why should I have to change who I am for this platform just to make some money?
so who are you? How would you describe yourself and your brand if they're one and the same? If they're separate, one and the other?
That's a good question. I mean, they are the same.
Okay.
I've started doing this knowing that as long as you tie your brand to who you are, you're never going to run out of stuff to talk about or
Okay.
stuff to do.
Okay. So
So-
you do feel that your brand is very aligned with who you are.
It
It's
is.
not like you have to turn it on and off.
No.
Off brand, on brand. You're just being you.
I just woke up like 30 minutes before the stream, and they're like, "Why you look tired?" Because I woke up, I didn't eat, I just woke up and came right here and started the day.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you need some food?
I'm hungry. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm gonna get food later, but yeah.
All right.
They get so needy when I woke up and the first thing, when's he going live? When's he going live? Where's the update? I'm like, oh my god, like I didn't even get to, they feel entitled to all of my time.
I have 3 kids, so I'm familiar with that feeling. Okay. So you feel like your brand is one and the same with your personality.
Yes, and it's hard to separate sometimes. Hard to forget. Like when I'll be candid, I went back to see my family, and when they say my real name, I forget that's my real name.
Okay.
I'm like, whoa, like Hubert. Like I forget that people still call me that.
Okay.
So I'm so used to being like performative that it's hard to really sometimes remember who you are outside
So you
of the performance.
become your performance.
Yes.
Which is different than your performance being you.
But if I've been doing this for 12 years, the performance is me, isn't it?
That's interesting. That's a philosophical question. I don't know. It's like the chicken or the egg. Did the performance become you, or did you become the performance? I don't know that we can answer that honestly. But I think it is interesting about I think it's interesting to think about separating or noticing what parts may be a little bit different from, between you and your persona when you're streaming, if any.
I forget what they are.
Okay. So how would you describe yourself, aka your brand?
My motto is seek truth through funny.
Seek truth
Through funny, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Tell me more.
So I like to get to the truth. I like to have difficult conversations,
Okay.
but you have to entertain, or else people are not going to pay attention. So I also think the funny thing is usually the most truthful.
Okay.
Whatever makes the room laugh or like breaks that uncomfortable silence, that tends to be based in truth.
Okay. Humor, I think it's a superpower.
Yeah.
I think it is monumental in driving change and in allowing people to connect. So I would agree with you there. Regarding truth, I mean, it's not that you're asking me to tell you what I think about your motto, but I'm, kind of taking it in. I think truth is interesting. Do you think there is one universal truth?
I do.
Okay. I think I'm used to seeing
People's
how
truth,
right.
my truth.
As a therapist,
Yeah.
I'm always like, I work with couples and I'm listening to two people and I'm like, oh, this is your experience. What's yours? And if I find myself like,
Siding.
siding or leaning more towards like someone, then I'm like, I'm missing half of the story. I have to find the other half.
Right.
And so,
That's
it's
funny.
interesting.
Do you side with the woman?
Not at all.
Really?
I have actually found that I end up having like a very male-oriented clientele. But I've always been like that. I've had a lot of guy friends and I feel really comfortable.
What do you think is the number one problem in the modern relationship?
That's such a great question. I'll tell you what people say. People say it's communication problems. But I think that's just an umbrella for a million things that happen underneath it. I think one of the problems is that we don't know how to effectively have uncomfortable conversations. You were talking about uncomfortable conversations, and I think it's super important to have them. I think people think you either avoid them or you are having a fight. And it doesn't have to be either of those extremes. I think we can have conversations about difficult things with the right tools. And so I think a lot of people lack that. So they'll either get really reactive and conflictual and yell, or they'll avoid and leave. It's kind of like fight or flight instinct.
I haven't had a real relationship in a long time. I think it's impossible to do with this. And I'm not trying to victimize myself by saying this, but this is just what it is. If you like put everything into this, there's no time to really delve into social relationships outside of streaming. Like even all my
really
friendships
hard.
and everything are all streaming relationships.
And is it all virtual, or does it ever have like an in-person component?
It is, but it's usually whenever it's not on camera, it's like just discussing what we're going to be doing on camera.
That's hard. You're a workaholic.
And then even the girls that I'll like hang around sometimes, I'm waiting till marriage personally, but some of the girls like I'll think of it like see a girl like, oh, she'd be great for stream. Like I could play games with her.
You're
I could do a
working.
cooking stream. Yeah, there's not really any time because if I would having a relationship is like having a part-time job. You know,
Yeah,
it's
I think I
a
agree with
commitment.
that.
You know,
It takes effort.
it does.
Yes.
There's no time
and
for
you
that.
want to put time into it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't really have real relationships.
And how do you feel about giving that part up to have this life?
I don't know. I was
Because
thinking
it
about
sounds
that
like
last
right
night.
now you're giving that up
Yeah.
for this. Is that like a conscious choice that you make? Like, I'm all in my career right now. I'm okay with giving that up. Or have you kind of just realized that that's what's happening?
It's just that's what it is. Like if you want to succeed in this, like you can't sacrifice it all.
Is it because you'd be lacking time? Or is it because if you had a steady, fulfilling relationship, your content wouldn't be as good?
It's both.
Both. Interesting. Huh. Well, you just got me thinking, did you watch that series on Netflix, Nobody Wants This, or Nobody Wants This?
No.
It's really interesting. It's this girl and her sister, they run a podcast. And then she starts dating a rabbi, and she's not Jewish. And so it's kind of like her sister tells her that her stream content goes down once she starts having like a steady relationship, and once she wants to keep part of her private life private. And so it's interesting for me to think about that, like how content creation and what people are interested in hearing and seeing sometimes takes away from you having something that is more private.
Right. Like Taylor Swift, for example, would she have a good catalog of music if she was in a stable relationship, or is all of her music based upon breakups and having toxic boyfriends?
We'll see what comes next. It seems like she's in a good one now. I don't know, but I do think heartbreak and loneliness and a lot of these things make for good content. I can definitely see how there's like an inverse relationship.
So do you think I'm sacrificing my mental health in order to succeed here?
I wouldn't feel capable of judging that because I haven't done what you do. I do think it must be so difficult to be an open book. How long are you live for?
They're gonna say that I'm not live enough, but I'm live almost every day.
Let me see.
They're gonna say that I okay. They're saying 1 hour a month. It's see, but they're saying they're calling me lazy. Cap, lazy, 1 hour max, never. He's
Oh my
lazy.
goodness, this
They're
goes
saying
fast.
this because they want all my life. I'm live every day. I've been live almost every single day. But
Wow.
and whatever, and they want all my time. If I'm not live 24 hours a day, they call me lazy. That's how it works. Isn't that insanity?
Crazy fan
That
base,
is,
bro.
that is a lot to ask of anyone.
He's lying.
Oh wow. So what do you mean that you're one and the same with those comments? So for example, right now, you kind of showed that you think differently than your community in the sense that like you
No,
you do think you're in the content creation space.
They
a
know what
lot
they're
of the
doing.
time.
They're trolling me. They know that I'm not lazy. They're just saying that to get me to work harder because they see me as a slave dancing monkey to entertain
So
them.
how do you separate their trolling, the influence these comments have on you, from what you want to do?
That's the hard part.
Yeah.
You know what I want to do? I want to make documentaries. I made this documentary called Letter from Bosnia, and I had to take time away from streaming to do that. And I loved it, and they loved it. But the whole time I'm filming it, when I wasn't streaming, they're like, oh, they start like getting really upset and angry. So it's difficult, and I feel the stress and the burden of it. When I'm like not streaming, I'm like, oh my, like,
Yeah.
you know.
I hear you. So what do you do when people are upset with you and uncomfortable? So say that they're disappointed with the fact that you haven't streamed for a day or a month. You notice that it weighs on you, and then how do you react?
I get angry.
Okay. So it's hard to separate them from the direction you're taking.
That's why me we're one and the same. Like it's tied.
Okay.
It's a soul tie.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I always say that in relationships, and this is like a relationship, you and your, what would you and your streaming people, you and your community?
The chat.
You and the chat
Yeah.
have a relationship. And in relationships, 1 + 1 = 3. There's you, there's the chat,
And the relationship.
itself. Ah,
Right.
It looks like your mother's a therapist.
Yeah, well, I've heard that before. Like the marriage is separate from the two people. The marriage is a separate. It's like something you work on.
It's
you
the
build.
part that the two people overlap in, right? And so at any given time, I'm assessing how much self are you giving up, how much of your own thinking, of your own essence, of, you know, how much of what you're doing is for the other and vice versa, as opposed to like, do I give part of me to the relationship, but another part I look out for myself, and there can be some separation there. Just for sustainability, because if you give all yourself to the relationship, how long will it go before one day you turn around and you say like,
What am I?
Who am exactly? Who am I?
Who am I outside of this relationship?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And especially because you're saying, well, you said that you're sacrificing future relationships for this, but is that something you want?
A future
Eventually?
relationship? Yeah. Way more. I would, if I could have like 5 kids and a marriage and all that, for instead of these guys, I would take it in a second.
Well, I'm sure you could.
Yeah.
It's just right now it seems like you're choosing this.
Yeah.
Which is okay if it's your choice. Just want to make sure that you've been thoughtful about it.
I like the comparison, like what am I outside of this relationship? It's the same thing with this. Like what am I without the stream? And what's my identity? Like would I just have an identity crisis without the streaming? When you pour that much time and energy into it,
What
it's
do
hard.
you think? Would you?
It's hard to. I've been doing it for so long. It's hard to figure out.
Here's my guess.
Okay.
I think you'd find yourself with space like with a blank slate. And I think that that is both an opportunity and a challenge. Sometimes it's easier to be busy and to know what we're going to do every day, even if we don't like it or even if it's challenging. Routine calms us down. But then when you have blank space or, you know, just an opportunity to do something new, you really can find yourself really lost. I'm not saying that this is what would happen to you, but a lot of people might find themselves just not knowing where to start or having to dig deep before they take a new direction. So it could be really uncomfortable for a while. Unless, another thing I'm thinking about, because nothing has to be super extreme, is that maybe you find some time, even if it's a little time, to brainstorm and start creating a separation. And it doesn't mean that anything huge would change, but just like, how am I a little bit different or separate from my chat? And just kind of like start thinking about that. So if one day this stops, you're not starting from scratch with doing all the thinking.
So start now.
Yeah.
Start planning an exit strategy now.
Or just, you know, separating your identity slightly.
Okay.
Which doesn't mean you have to stop being like truthful or anything.
Someone said kick her before she retires, SNEAKO.
What does that mean?
That means like someone saying kick her out of the stream before she gets me to retire. You get, yeah.
I get that now.
Yeah.
No, I don't think you're ready to retire. I don't think you'd have me here if you wanted to retire.
No,
but I think you want to be thoughtful about how you go on.
Do you think depression is real?
Yes.
What is depression?
I think there's a book called the DSM-5. It's a diagnostics book that has like all the specific criteria and the time frames where a person needs to exhibit certain symptoms to be diagnosed as having a depression. So there is like a clinical, much in the same way that you'd go to a doctor and they tell you if you have diabetes or not, the same exists for depression. And there's like actual chemical imbalances that can take place. But then I do also think that we use the term a little more loosely in our culture to sort of describe people that are feeling a little down, not motivated, just struggling to get through their days. And, you know, that's what I think. There's like a clinical, medical sense to it, a way of looking at it, for which I recommend seeing a psychiatrist. But then there's also just how we use it to explain maybe not being motivated, feeling a little lost, lacking energy.
So it's a feeling?
I think we use that word to describe a feeling sometimes.
So
it's also a medical condition. So two things.
Do you believe that there's a chemical imbalance?
It can happen, yes.
What's the chemical imbalance? Like a lack of dopamine, a lack of serotonin?
Well, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'd rather not get specifically into the diagnosis, but why were you asking? I'm curious.
That's just a conversation, a debate that I've had nonstop with everybody.
What is the debate?
I mean, people on Twitch believe that depression's real, that it's a chemical imbalance, all this stuff. I personally don't think that there's evidence showing that there's a chemical imbalance and all this stuff. And
really?
Yeah, and I don't think I've never seen any studies that show that. I don't really believe in the idea of depression. I think it's just sadness, which is a feeling, and you shouldn't prescribe feelings. It's like saying like, oh, you prescribing someone as sad, where you could just then just stop being sad.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't think it works that way. Like, I think depression has more to it than just feeling sadness. Have you looked at that movie Inside Out? Have you seen it?
That's a cartoon movie, right?
Yes.
I don't know. I think I saw it. Can you summarize it again?
I'll summarize it. I'm obsessed with it. I think it's like the best movie ever made. There's two at this point, but the first one, the main characters are the different emotions inside of us. And so there's like joy, sadness in that one, fear, and a couple more. And it's really interesting to see how they interact. And sadness has a really important role. I think that because of how you're describing your thoughts of depression, I think you might enjoy seeing that movie. How important sadness can be to then
appreciate happiness.
Appreciate joy. Yeah, happiness.
Exactly. But people that believe they're depressed, they think that they can't be happy, that they're in a state of constant sadness.
I don't think that people that are really depressed feel like they have much of a choice.
Doesn't matter. But you shouldn't act on just how you feel all the time.
I get what you're saying. I'm up for, I like the idea of acting with choice through our feelings.
We have free will.
Right. And to sort of manage our actions thoughtfully, knowing that you're feeling certain things, because you can't really make feelings go away. That's my opinion. You can acknowledge the feeling and you work through it, right? It's not like, oh, if I'm angry, I'm free to just react however I want because I'm angry, right? I just think that, again, there are different degrees of depression, and I think that most people, if they can choose otherwise, they would. Most people, not everyone.
But I think the major thing holding them back is they think that there's no choice. That they're in this state, they're like, I'm chemically imbalanced, therefore I have no choice. If they could understand that it's a choice for me to work through this, they would.
Hopefully. I mean, to me, at the center of the therapy I do and how I think about change in life is that choice is the most important thing that we have. You know, you can't control all your circumstances, but you can control how you react to them. So I too really treasure and value this idea of choice.
Sounds like we agree.
Yes, on choice, specifically about depression, it would depend on every case and everything. I don't think people choose to be depressed.
But
generalizing is really difficult when you're speaking of mental health, of anything really. That's where I come back to this idea of universal truths. Do I believe that either you or I will have the truthful answer? I don't. I think there's just so much variety that we need to look specifically at each case.
So you believe in the concept of my truth, that everybody has a truth?
I'll tell you what I think. I think there are few things in life and in relationships that are absolutely factual. Things that we can say where like it's fact and most people will agree, or all people will agree because they're fact. I think a lot of our human existence is dictated by feeling, even though we like to think otherwise. So I don't know if that answers.
Our human existence is determined by feeling?
And it's very subjective. Like, where do you come from and how do you perceive what's threatening, what's not threatening, etc.
So what about a schizophrenic person? When they're talking to a stop sign, are they actually talking to a stop sign if they feel like they are?
They feel like they are. That's their truth. You would think otherwise.
But should we validate that truth? Or should we say there's an objective truth, you're not talking to the stop sign, you're wrong?
Well, where does it take you to get into an argument with a schizophrenic telling them that what they're doing is not truth? Like, not true.
I mean, if they're disrupting people and they're scaring children, you can be like, hey, this is not a living being. Stop doing this.
I get what you're saying. But here's the thing. Say that you're really anxious right now.
Okay.
And I tell you to calm down. What do you think will happen?
I immediately, my heart rate sped up when you did that, yeah.
Okay. So if you find a person having a schizophrenic episode and you're like, dude, that's a stop sign, not a person. Like, just stop. What are the chances that that's actually going to be effective in managing the episode? So
you're saying approach it with empathy.
Yes.
And you think my approach is more forceful?
I don't want to say that you're lacking empathy. I think that you're trying to find fact and truth. And I think that is an honest pursuit. I think that there's something really cool about that. I just don't think it's that simple. And so one metric that I like to use in therapy is like, how useful is whatever we're doing, right? And so when somebody is having a really hard time and they're talking to a stop sign, or they're really anxious or angry, and somebody comes to them and they're like, calm down or stop doing that, is that useful? And I think we can all agree the worst thing you can do with somebody that's not calm is to tell them to calm down. So it's more about like, how do I find that thing that is useful, that will make an actual positive difference to get to where we want to go? Is it for this person to calm down so the people around them feel safe and the children aren't scared? Then what do I do in that scenario, right?
I think we agree. It's just taking a different approach.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, I think it's just a different approach. I just don't see it worthwhile to validate everybody's truth. Because when some
I would
people,
agree.
there's a lot of truths that people believe to be real, and they're just like people believe that they're not in their own body. For example, we got to
Yeah.
tell you just have to be
So I
realistic.
come back to choice with that. We can decide how much time and energy we want to dedicate to validating everyone else's truths, right?
Okay.
You know, do you want to take the time to speak to every single person and be like, yes, I hear you? You may not want to. You may find that futile or not a good use of your energy, and I respect that.
Don't you think that so many people believing in their own individual truth is why therapy is so prevalent right now? Because of how much delusion is allowed, and so people need to figure out sense of if there was an objective truth about what's right and what's wrong that everybody followed, there'd be less of a need for people to go and hire professionals to talk about it.
I love that question. I promise you, I'm going to take it with me and think about it a lot. But I'll tell you the first thing that comes to mind. So I think every single human navigates a balance between individuality and togetherness. So all of us have a need to belong, like belonging to a community or to relationships or to a family. Some sense of belonging is crucial to human survival. That's why like solitary confinement sometimes can be like the worst type of punishment. So we all have a need to belong. That's part of what drives you keeping your chat all the time in your mind. It's like if I give them what they want, I belong, and it's nice to be wanted, even if you want them to be less. Sorry, I think I have the sun. Now I can't like focus on you.
Yeah.
No, you're fine. I just need to lean forward. Okay, so everybody has a need for togetherness and a sense of belonging. But then we also have a need to feel like an individual and somewhat unique and have some of our own thinking. And some of us will be more towards the belonging side or towards the individual side. Okay? And I do think right now, culturally speaking, and in society, we've gone very individualistic. We've gone very like, this is my truth completely, and I decide what I want, and to a point where I think we go from extremes and then we self-regulate, and I think we will start self-regulating sometime in the near future because we've come to a point where everybody wants to make their own rules and think very, very, very independently, and that some people might say, well, like that's nice and it's a freedom we all deserve, but I will say that with freedom comes responsibility. And it's like with parenting and kids, like sometimes kids want to do whatever they want, but they actually feel safe when there are boundaries. And that's why this like general truths and universal rules and stuff, sometimes we don't like them, but they do serve an important role in like taking the thinking out of every single thing we do, out of every single thing we think. So it's just a reciprocal relationship. It's about finding the balance, I think.
Is that the product of social media? Why is it gone so extreme right now before it regulates?
That's a good question. I try not to think cause and effect. I wouldn't just blame social media, but what do you think? What role has social media played in either allowing people to think too much about their personal truths versus creating like a universal truth? Is that your question? Like,
Yeah, it's made everything more internal. It's not normal for people to exist in their reflection. It used to be like, the reason we like first person shooter games is because you exist here without seeing yourself. The caveman reality is just like walking around the club and beating the tiger and dragging it. You're just here. But now that we're looking at our reflection, we exist in two dimensions at once. So it's not just about the tiger, it's how we look beating the tiger. Is my hair good while I'm beating it? Is this ethical to be clubbing it this way? How are people going to perceive this treatment? So, this
is mind blowing. I don't know anything about gaming. Sorry, everybody. So I didn't know that there was a difference between the one where you're just looking at what's around you versus the one where you're looking at what's around you. That's really neat to think about. Yeah, it's definitely a whole second layer, and a very distracting one at that, to think about our image and the perception that others may have about who we are. A lot of effort goes into defining ourselves.
Because that's what.
But then we come back to what we were talking about before. Sorry to interrupt you, which is like, are you defining yourself based on your, on your own internal values, what drives you, who you want to be, or are you defining yourself based on what you think the perception of the people around you is of who you are, right? So it's like,
That's what I've built. I think a lot of my personality on is how people view me.
exactly.
It's been less internal because I've grown up. You know, before I hit
So
puberty, I was making
exposed.
these videos.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
whole life is online.
Do you feel vulnerable at all doing this?
What do you mean by vulnerable?
Is there ever a time where it just feels like you're putting too much on the line, where you feel very exposed and unprotected?
Yeah, you just get used to it because if you feel vulnerable, then it shows, and then the content's gonna get worse. So you can't really feel. You're not supposed to like, dive into those feelings. That's only gonna hurt it more. Does that make sense?
So you're expected to not feel.
I mean, it's not about expectations. It's just not beneficial to feel that. It's not gonna help me. So if I felt vulnerable, like what? There's no point in me sitting in those feelings.
Is there any other streamer or online person that you feel does show up with their feelings and with the vulnerability, and that they're somehow able to strike that chord and still be famous and successful?
Yeah, everyone has every streamer and content creator. They have vulnerable moments, but it always ends up biting them in the future. Anytime you show like complete honesty like that, there's always an equal amount of enemies that are watching and the vultures ready to use that against you. So
How specifically do you get punished?
people will just use that your weak moments against you. You think there's
Like,
a
how does that exploitation of your weakness actually come to life?
People-
I can imagine, I can relate to the feeling you're describing, where it would be like, I'm being exploited for that right now, but in what ways does it factually and actually punish you?
So say if you show a vulnerable moment and you share an honest moment with the people watching, the core community, the people that really appreciate you, they'll show appreciation. But
Okay.
there's the evil eyes always there. So everybody else is hearing it as well.
So what does the evil eye do? Because you're saying that the true people, your core community,
they will
they
appreciate
do
that.
value you.
Yes.
So,
But that could be
so that's
overshadowed by
important-
everybody
That's
else.
important to separate from the other ones.
Right, but it could be overshadowed by everybody else.
Okay. Because of the comments they make,
Yeah.
and the comments they make impact you how?
I mean, it can undermine it. Like, say, like, if the community wants to show support, like, hey, we love SNEAKO, he's doing this, and then immediately someone will reply, like, with that vulnerable moment, you, he said this, he said that, and then they're like, oh, should I not?
And what about ignoring them? Because
See,
you know that you connected with your core community over something that is important and very real. Can that be enough?
yeah, you could ignore it. You could ignore it, but
Yeah, I think ignoring is powerful. But
you have to ignore it, and then everybody else who likes you has to ignore it as well. And then it. So it's just my point is, it's better to not give any ammunition out there.
that's how you protect yourself.
Yeah, you kind of have to. I've seen it both ways because I've been a very vulnerable, open person since I started. Everything in my life is out there. So, and everything can be used against you. And I would say to anybody, like, just keep it. Don't. It's not worth it.
Wow.
It's better to shield yourself from from the vultures.
Yeah. What are the vultures saying about us talking now?
Oh, they're not here. They're not
Oh, they're not here.
here. Yeah,
Okay.
they're not here.
They're not in your chat?
No. But they'll
Okay.
be on every other social media platform.
Okay. So now you
Haters.
are on Twitch. How does that change what you do?
It's a liberal dominated platform.
Okay.
Rumble, for example, I would say, I'm going to be candid, I would say, like, therapy sucks. Therapy, it's a waste of. Twitch is like, we love therapy, this is good. It's more empathetic, liberal feelings.
So you're doing
oriented.
this for Twitch.
No, not for Twitch. Not for. Yes.
Yeah. I like your candidness. That's okay. I'm not offended
Yeah.
at all.
It's a liberal dominated platform. You know,
Okay.
feelings, and Rumble's like, no, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, conservative values. It's a different arena completely.
Okay. So then, do you feel you're choosing between one and the other?
SNEAKO.
Yes.
Which one are you gonna choose?
That's what I got to figure out. I got to figure out what's worthwhile.
It's interesting.
I have to figure out what's worthwhile.
Well, I think you know which one is more reflective of who you are. From our conversation, I get a feeling that you know that.
Yeah. For sure.
So anytime somebody likes to wants to try and go completely against their essence, I think that is tricky. And I always wonder how sustainable is that. But then that isn't to say that I don't think we're capable of some change or adjustment. Like I think there are questions like, what can I do slightly different that allows me to exist in both of these platforms? Or what is one thing that I don't want to do? Maybe I refrain from this one thing. And see what difference that makes. Track it.
So don't go full in or full out. Just kind of balance it.
Yeah. Just get really thoughtful about what did I do today? Would I adjust and do something a little bit different that allows me to, if your goal is to be on both platforms or on more.
Balance it out.
It sounds like for you it might be, I mean, I don't know all the details, but it might be more about something you don't do rather than something you do.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Is that accurate?
I think it's accurate.
Okay.
When should I get a relationship? And dial this back.
Well, when? I don't know. I'm curious about how you would try and meet someone.
Yeah, I don't know either. There's been opportunities, there's been some, but I'm not sure.
What's getting in the way of finding one now, apart from your work schedule?
Is that you have to hide so much of that. Like I wouldn't want my wife to be exposed to the internet at all. At all.
Okay.
And it seems inevitable if you're going full time like that. It seems like it's inevitable for them.
Because you'd be you never told me how many hours a day do you do this for?
See, you can't trust them. They're gonna say
I'm gonna trust you. I'm talking to you. I think
it's
I can
hours.
barely track this.
I would go like probably 4 hours a day on average.
4 hours a day.
I know they're saying 1, but 2 hours.
1 hour a year.
It's not true.
Half an hour.
It's not true. So you see this is the issue right here. Like everything we're speaking about, you can see it in real time.
Okay. So 4 hours. Well, people have relationships and they work much longer than they're plugged into their jobs for much longer than 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
So what do you do with the other 20?
Well, I found it difficult. Like sometimes when I hang out with the girl, I'm just thinking about the stream. I'm like looking through the Twitter, looking through comments. Like I'm not existing in the moment. Mm-hmm. And you know how women are. Women like to be like the center of attention. I can't give that.
I think every person wants to feel special, especially if they're trying to find their future partner. It's hard to feel special if you're scrolling through your chat.
Even if I'm not scrolling through it, I'm still thinking about it. I'll be sitting at a dinner trying to like care about what she's talking about. And I genuinely just like don't care at all because what she's saying is, and I don't even want to be funny or entertaining. I don't want to because I just want to save that energy for the stream.
So it sounds to me
really
like
sick.
you're not ready.
But,
unless you want to challenge yourself differently. So okay, if you are noticing that you're really wanting to find a relationship, a person to have a relationship with, what is one thing you do differently? Going back to this useful effort and this idea of what is one thing I would change? I think you already have your answer, just based on what we just talked about.
What's the answer?
You go on a date and you leave your phone to the side for 30 minutes and you give her your undivided attention. Could you survive through that?
That sounds brutal. That sounds bad.
But I think that's the way you start having both of your worlds, your personal one and this one, your work one, if we can call it that. It seems like right now it's very personal and work at the same time, but I think it might be interesting for you to start making that distinction. And, like I said, it's not about you quitting this now, but it's get thoughtful. And so maybe just dedicate half an hour once a week to having an interesting conversation with a girl. But you probably want to find a girl that you find interesting. Who would that be?
I don't really find. I'm not sure. I don't find women to be interesting,
Ouch.
really.
I mean, not for me, but how come?
Um, I don't like the stuff that they're interested.
Never? Like you've never found a girl interesting
Maybe when I was younger, when I was like a teenager.
before you were
No, yeah, I was still doing it, but I could be infatuated with the woman
okay.
and kind of like give it like everything. I used to be the type of guy like I become obsessed. Same way I'm obsessed with my work now. I'd be obsessed with the woman and I give everything like this is, and I would paint this idea in my head about her, be full romantic and think about her nonstop and give her gifts and everything. And then after a while, I just get bored. I'm like, oh, she's just a girl.
She's a human
She's
like
a girl.
you.
Yeah, like she has flaws. She's not a
Yeah.
movie. She's a girl.
I
And then
guarantee you, any girl you meet will have flaws. We all do.
Yeah.
Any human. So maybe that's your challenge to be a little bit less. Did you say obsessed or intent? What? How did you self-describe?
Obsessed.
Obsessed.
Yeah.
So a little bit less obsessive. 30 minutes at a time. Just like, can I have a relatively interesting conversation with someone for 30 minutes?
Have you dealt with ADHD people before?
Yes, but again, I don't focus on the diagnosis
On the
as
oh, yeah.
much.
Yeah. How would you fix that bored problem? Like sometimes she will be like sort of interesting, and then immediately it's just like it just goes down, and then I get disgusted.
Are you bored because she talks too much? Like when does the switch kind of flip that you start feeling bored?
Should I be candid?
Yeah.
Sometimes like after sex, it's like the infatuation goes away completely.
Okay. So you said at some point during our conversation, you said you were waiting for marriage. You
Yeah.
said something like that. What do
Yeah.
you mean by that?
Now I'm waiting. I'm waiting. I'm not like dating at all. I'm just waiting until I get married. Like I don't.
To have sex.
Yeah.
Okay, but you do need to date before you get married?
Maybe in certain scenarios, yeah.
Okay. Huh. When did you stop having sex?
It's been like a year.
Okay. Why did you stop? How come? What made you make that decision?
Religious reasons.
Okay. I think that's legit. You know, it sounds to me like you noticed that after having sex, you would lose interest. That's probably because of some core belief. The moment that person shared that with you, there is something that maybe made you feel like there was nothing else to pursue. I don't know.
Yeah. The chase
Yeah.
is over.
The chase.
I already
is
clubbed
over.
the tiger. The tiger's dead. I already ate it. Time to get to the next hunt.
So primitive. Like, okay, so then what comes after the chase? So you talk about like dating and sex, and then you talk about marriage. What is marriage about for you?
What we spoke earlier, I think marriage is a separate entity from the two people. It's something you need to work and build upon.
Yes.
It's a union, all those words.
Okay.
It's something, yeah, it's like building a house. You need to build a house with
Yeah.
with the significant other.
What does it look like in practical day life? Like, what do you share with that person? What do you not share with that person? What's the basis of that union? Is it a partnership or maybe not? Is it?
I think earlier, me when I was younger, when I was a romantic, I'd be like, it needs to be a partnership.
Yes.
Now, I'm like, it just needs to be a balance. She needs to provide certain things, and I need to provide certain things, and I don't want to share everything. Like, I'm not going to give her my phone password, for example. There's
That's-
a lot of things I don't want to share.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, one thing is secrecy, another thing is to keep some parts separate. I'm up for keeping some things separate. Secrecy, I don't know. Because I think that just creates this idea of like, what are you hiding from me? But I'd have to think more about that.
But I have everything in my phone, like my business, my
Okay.
passwords, my banking.
But so when you shifted from a partnership to a balance and the way you described it, it sounded very transactional.
Yes.
Tell me more about what informed that shift. Like, what did a partnership mean when you were a romantic? And then kind of what happened that made you turn it into more a transactional partnership type situation.
When I was a romantic, I would think that I believed in the concept of soulmates,
Okay.
that people fall in love and that they're destined to be together, and it doesn't matter what you provide. And then you realize like women are only going to really appreciate you for what you bring to the table. Same thing with men. Men are only going to like value women for what they bring. So I don't believe in soulmates. It's more like what we love each other for what we do, not who we are.
Oof. I don't know. I'm a little bit of a romantic. I'm a realist too. I think that what we provide makes a big difference. And I'm not talking just like material things, but I think, how we show up and it does make a significant difference. It's not like love is everything. At the same time, I do think that we can fall in love with who someone else is. Like, do you admire that person, what they stand for, how they see the world? Are you interested in their thinking?
No,
Even if it's...
I don't see it as possible.
Really? Okay. How come? When did you decide it was impossible?
Because people are flawed.
Yes.
And so I don't think I could fall in love with flaws. That's accepting a flawed existence and a flawed relationship.
Are you striving for perfection?
Yeah. And even though it's impossible, yeah, the goal is to be as perfect as possible.
Can you fall in love with another person who is also striving for perfection, knowing that they're flawed? Like, can you admire someone
Someone's
who's
pursuit.
doing the same thing as you?
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone's pursuit of perfection rather than their... Okay.
Where did you learn that pursuing perfection was a worthy
Pursuit?
pursuit?
I don't see anything else like worthwhile with your time. What else is there to do?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I don't like this new concept of accepting your flaws. I think it's better to get rid of them.
What do you think of mistakes?
You make them, well, you want to make as little as possible. You don't want to repeat your mistakes.
Right. I like that. Not repeating them. Oof. I don't like making mistakes either, but I'm trying to figure out how to develop my own thinking to be a little bit more welcoming of them, not just to excuse them, but to use them as information and growth. I think it's a little bit about like how we frame things. Going back to this idea of universal truth. Are mistakes good or bad?
Bad.
I would say it depends. I agree with you. You want to avoid making like mistakes all the time and certainly repeating the same one over and over. At the same time, can we understand that mistakes may have value if you turn them into a learning experience and they become a growth opportunity?
Well, it's the same thing about being depressed. Like, depression is good because you appreciate happy. Same thing, a mistake is good until you find the positive from it. But the mistake in a vacuum is bad.
Correct. I think that's what it meant about universal truth not actually being as useful or applicable in human day-to-day existence and relationships.
Okay, so human relationships are separate from... What do you consider to be universal? You believe in God?
I do.
Okay, yeah, so universal truth starts from God. And then a relationship is separate from that. We have to accept that it's going to be flawed and operate. Yeah, I get it now. Okay, so it's not like you're accepting of flaws, but you understand that they're inevitable.
Right, and I think, I think one thing is to acknowledge and accept that they exist, but then also make a plan for what you do with them. So it's a little bit of a process. Like, first I understand that that they exist. I recognize it. I can do a deep dive and say like, wow, this is one way that I'm flawed. Understand it, pay attention to it, even like try and track, where does this come from? How does this, because I think most human behavior makes sense in context. So if you look at previous generations in your family, you may find information as to why you do certain things the way you do. Either because you do the same or because you do the opposite. There's a lot of rich information in our previous generations. So first I'm like, how can I explain this flaw? How does it make sense that I'm kind of this way? Not as an excuse, not to be like, well, I understand it, so that's that. But kind of to say like, oh, where does it come from? How do I make sense of it? And once you do, it's again, what's a useful effort? How do I want to tweak this so that it stops interfering with where I want to get to?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Everything's gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine.
It's funny that that's the conclusion you came to. Usually when I have this conversation, I'm like, oh my God, that's a lot to do. But you took it sort of as, it eased you or it gave you reassurance?
Um,
Or
Yeah.
you just said that because you're bored at this point?
no. It's a lot to take. Yeah, baby.
Oh, SNEAKO. All right. I respect that. It is heavy material. Let me ask you something. Are you
Okay.
thinking about the chat right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you thinking about the chat 3 minutes ago?
Yes. The whole time.
The whole time?
The whole time.
How come you're not looking? Are you curious? What
I
they're
am,
saying?
but
Or do you already know what they're saying?
Okay, I'll give you a deep dive into my head. I'm thinking about them nonstop, but I want to keep you engaged, and I know that if I keep looking, that it's going to break your engagement, and that it's going to be discombobulated, and the chat's going to dislike it.
So
I
you're
know
thinking of them, you're thinking of me, and you're not thinking of yourself.
exactly.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Well,
why
no,
you
I am
wanna-
thinking about myself too, because I'm going to be happier if they're happy and you're happy and everyone's happy.
I don't know. I don't know.
Oh, so what do you think I should be doing?
Think of you right now.
I can't. I can't. Because I can't.
Okay. That's all right.
Well, okay, think of me and do what?
Just recognize maybe one thing you're feeling, one thing you're thinking. But not like, oh, if I say this out loud, will the chat like it or not like it? Or
Yeah.
what is she gonna think about whether, whether I'm brutally honest? Like, no.
The only time where I don't have those thoughts is when I'm praying. That's it.
Good for you.
That's it.
So then praying is really important.
Yeah.
You want to find spaces where you can disconnect from this and from me and from, where you can connect with yourself or God.
Yeah. That's the only time.
Spirituality and religion is really important.
Do people find religion or do they leave religion when they speak to you?
Find or leave?
Yeah. Do you think they get a closer connection or distance?
Oh, that's interesting. So let's see. I'm Catholic and I have clients with very different religions and we can have like really interesting conversations. As long as they want to. Like I'm not the one that determines what's relevant and what isn't in the therapy room. I myself, the more I went into therapy, I kind of disconnected somewhat from my religion because it's like sometimes people say, oh, whatever God's will. And I'm like, yes, God's will. And also, how do I become the designer of my own life? I do think I'm blessed, privileged, all these things, but also like choice in self, right? Because some people would say, well, God made me this way. And I'm like, okay. Or God wants this for me or this direction. Okay. But then do you have choice in your day-to-day life of how you get there, where you go, who you go with, So it's taken me a little while and it's still a work in progress to understand
The balance.
how much I take on as my own decisions and how much, some people won't even talk about God or religion, but they'll talk about spirituality and just like, is it fate? My husband, did God put him in my way or was it fate or, have we worked really hard to get to where we are? Probably a little bit of all of that. I don't know. That's again where universal truths are hard. How would anybody factually answer that?
Do you prefer confession or therapy?
Therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a funny episode of The Sopranos where have you seen The Sopranos?
only a little bit. My father-in-law is always telling me to watch it, and I have to add it to my watch list.
Yeah, Tony
But
Soprano.
I've heard the relationship with the therapist.
Yeah,
is
you have to watch
super
that show.
interesting. I do. I have
You have to
it
watch
on.
that show because Tony ends up speaking to his therapist all the time, and she's a woman, so he's kind of getting the femininity that is lacking in his life from his mom and his wife, like from there.
Okay.
And then he ends up like developing a crush on her.
Okay.
And then Carmela, his wife, she starts going to confession and then having a relationship, not a relationship, but like
Yes, well, a
connection with the
relationship,
priest.
right.
The
I
priest
mean-
is like connecting, and they're drinking the wine and everything, and they start. He starts like confessing that he like has feelings for her and all this.
Wow.
So it's a funny balance between the difference between like spirituality and therapy. Therapy, which is like, would you agree that it's like predominantly Jewish? Like a lot of like there's a lot of Jewish therapists.
I think there are. Yes, I think there's a lot of fantastic Jewish doctors and therapists. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I did my master's with some great Jewish friends. Yeah, but I think it's not exclusive.
Mm-hmm. And then confession, which is obviously a Catholic tradition.
For me, confession comes usually with a lot of like the solution in confession is to go pray and God would forgive. And I'm not saying that's useful or not. Again, I leave room for everyone to feel however they feel about that. But then what I like about therapy is like, how do I think about things? What plan do I create for prevention, for adjustment? How do I take matters into my own hand? Which I think is really useful because I'm a doer.
Yeah, so you think it's more than just like 10 Hail Marys, 10 Our
Right,
Fathers.
because I mean, yeah, if you do your 10 Hail Marys and then you leave and you do the same thing over and over.
Then what
Like I
happened?
pray that you give me serenity. Okay. I'm not saying that's good or bad. Do that, but then like what is your plan on how you're going to react when you don't have serenity? When somebody takes that serenity away, what are you going to do? And that's what I think I would talk about with someone in therapy, for example, in this case.
What's your diagnosis in this conversation?
I don't diagnose.
You don't diagnose? Well,
No. But in terms of what?
what's wrong with me?
Are you kidding me? I haven't thought of that for 1 minute in today's conversation.
You haven't?
That's not my lens at all.
Okay,
I think we've had an incredibly interesting conversation.
I think so too.
I think you've kept me engaged. So your thing that you were doing of how to keep me engaged, you did it. Because
That's the problem.
I almost forgot that.
they were
How many
there?
people are watching this? A
There's-
bunch.
Yeah,
Yeah. I forgot.
that's good.
This was engaging and entertaining.
But that's the problem that I've had with therapy. I went one time in college when I was going through a breakup, and then they made me go when I was a kid, like when I had ADHD.
Well,
and-
when someone told you that you had ADHD.
Yeah, exactly, when I was, like, 12
which you
years
don't feel was accurate.
I don't think it's real. I mean, I have hype. I mean, it's just a certain way of thinking. Anyway, I always feel like I had to entertain the therapist.
Oh,
So I'd be sitting in this conversation
you're
like,
a performer.
yeah, even in the one-on-one, I'm like, I don't want to make him bored. That I wouldn't be vulnerable and honest. I'm like, how do I keep you on I don't want to waste your time because I always felt like my problems were like, why am I even here? There's people that are going through real things in the world. I'm sitting down on a couch like with some magazines.
But there's all sorts of therapy, and I think I like therapy for like optimizing. So how do I, like I said at the beginning, how do I get to where I want to go? What's getting in the way? And I love thinking, so it's very insight driven. So hopefully part of the time you weren't entertaining me and I got you to think about something differently. Maybe. If I did that, kudos to me. If
I think the
didn't-
takeaways are find a balance,
Okay.
and there's a difference between accepting flaws and accepting that people are flawed.
Correct. Yes.
There was one more, I think. What was the last one? They don't remember.
What do they think?
Um,
Oh my goodness. Inappropriate.
okay. They're trolls. They're-
Inappropriate too. Okay, that's all right.
Yeah. This is why you don't.
We're not gonna take those into consideration.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's better to not read them, to be honest.
That's fine. See, you can read it. That was another one. Like, you can decide who you give energy to and who you don't. So we were talking about people's truths, and like, you can decide not to pay attention to some of these losers. Sorry. No, but most of you, yeah, nice. Oh, that you're bored. I think that was a genuine laugh. No?
No, it was.
It was,
I was not bored. I was entertained.
Yeah,
And
I can
appreciate
assess
you.
that for myself. I think you weren't that bored. Yeah. So what did you think of this conversation? Since it wasn't therapy, I don't need to go against your belief that you don't believe in therapy.
It was good. It was good. I think it confirmed my ideas that therapy is a very feminine occupation.
Okay.
Like, I think even if it was a male,
You know, it's interesting. At first, it wasn't. All the really
Were men?
great, yes.
Like
all
Freud
the,
and
yes,
Jung?
Yes. Bowen, the one that's like the head of the theory that I practice, so many were males. But it's greatly shifted, and now there's a lot of women.
what do you think the shift was?
That's interesting. I don't know. I think at first psychologists came from psychiatry, which was more intense and hardcore and very, it was very medical. And then the less medical it got and more into psychology, which is separate from psychiatry. I don't know if men perceive it as softer or honestly, I don't know.
Have you read Freud?
Yeah, a little bit, but my background isn't mostly in psychology, but rather marriage and family therapy.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you do your reading on your psychologists and psychiatrists?
I've read some Jung.
Okay.
I like his audiobooks about the unconscious mind. That's stuff that I like to analyze. That's because those are the times, like in prayer when I'm sleeping, that's when I get to disconnect from this, and then I
Yes.
really figure out like
That's when you start thinking for yourself. What are my
Exactly.
ideas about the world? What are my principles, my values? That's what makes a person. That's your essence.
that's what makes who you are who you are.
Yes.
Yeah. So I analyze that a lot.
Thinking about thinking is really it's a fun pursuit, and I think you could find a girl that can do that with you.
But thinking about thinking is also what drives people to, you know, if people who overthink too much, they end up going crazy. I think there's also a benefit. Like people who are like
Disconnection.
70 IQ who just think like cavemen and go around and they get to go to festivals and drink Bud Light. That exists like Taylor Swift people.
Oh, I'm a Taylor Swift person,
You guys are
but
happy.
I think not all the time.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay, maybe a Taylor Swift's not like country
Yeah,
music
Taylor
or
Swift, not the.
like 21 Savage listeners.
I don't think you can find like an artist that describes a whole population, but I hear what you're saying. Simpler minds that are less.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, I hear that.
So instead of thinking internally all the time, like, what's this problem, that's how you start
Yeah.
finding
I
problems
hear-
that didn't exist.
This is another example where I'd take your thinking and I'd be like, how does it serve me and how does it not serve me? If I overthink, can I find moments where I disconnect? And maybe it's in prayer. And so you try and do more of that. But then also, like, how is your thinking beneficial to you and useful? And you take it to places where you want to go. Because there's a difference between ruminating, which is like when your thoughts kind of take over and they take the wheel and drive you to places you don't want to go, as opposed to like thinking with choice. Like, am I asking the questions and am I asking the right questions?
That's
Now
just-
you're bored.
No, I'm not bored. That's not boredom. It's just like I'm thinking about how she's thinking about me thinking, and they think, and it's too much. It's not boredom. It's just like, oh,
Yeah.
I want to club a tiger. That would have been a better existence for men, I think. That's why we love Minecraft so much, and why women love Sims. Sims, it's third person. You get to see the character, and you get to dress her up, and you get to go to the party, and you can see what she looks like. Minecraft is first person. You're here, and you're just running around. You're punching the dirt.
Back to basics.
Yeah, I think women are supposed to be analytical of how they look. And that's why therapy's so feminine, because it's thinking about thinking and it's thinking about how you're perceived. Where men were supposed to live without that and just act and just do and not exist in our mind, it exists in the world.
Probably. And there are some truths, or generally speaking, I can see part of that being true. But I will say some men like therapy with the right therapist.
Do you think some men like therapy just because they get to speak to a woman who's not nagging them all the time?
That's an interesting question, maybe. Possibly. That may be one of the reasons. I think some men want to be able to connect to females and how they think without, while also feeling heard, and that's not always possible in relationships. Some people just like a good conversation and maybe they get it in therapy. Some people maybe like results and they find them through the conversations. I don't know.
Do people cry?
Yeah, people cry. A lot of the times they apologize for crying, which I tell them not to, but yeah.
You seem like the type of person that I think you would cry if they cried.
Oh my God, recently it happened that I had to hold back tears. Not all the time, but recently it did happen to me. But it's not about me, right? So I held them back.
You're an empath.
I am.
So,
What's going on? Those are longer comments.
Yeah, they just hijacked it. That we need to mod this.
All right.
They're spamming song lyrics.
Whew.
Thank you so
Nico,
much.
Thank
I appreciate
you.
it.
This was interesting.
So, like Elsa said, just gotta let it go.
You knew that's what you were going to end with. I like the commitment. Do you remember everything you say throughout the stream?
No.
Yeah.
But now it exists in the ether forever, so.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening or not. Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Subscribe the channel because you want to watch SNEAKO's content, bro. Come on, subscribe it.